Otherwise, Mary Joy. Hi, Mary Joy.
Hello po, ma'am. Good evening.
Think, pwedeng pwedeng if you can lead the prayer tonight.
Yes po, ma'am.
Thank
Let
you.
us put ourselves in the holy presence of God in the name of the Father and of the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we come before you tonight, grateful for the opportunity to continue our studies. We ask for your guidance and strength as we prepare for the Environmental Planning Board exam. Clear our minds of negativity and distractions and grant us the focus and clarity we need to succeed. Bless us with good health and the wisdom to understand the materials. Above all, we pray for your grace and mercy that we may all pass this important exam and use our knowledge to serve others. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Joy. So I'll share my screen. Okay. So able to my screen now. Di pa? Can you can you see now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we ended with this slide this morning or in the afternoon. So I'll continue with this, although it's part of the one of the major schools of thought in planning, but I will articulate it here by providing you a little bit of history about instrumentalists or some background. So instrumentalism is the belief that theories are useful tools for making predictions, but they cannot be considered literally true or false. So theories is or theories serve as guides to successful action rather than as definitive or absolute truths. What else? The real test of theory. So these are the key points within instrumentalism or instrumentalism. The real test of theory is not whether it perfectly mirrors reality, but whether it helps achieve desired outcomes or solve problems. Also, it depends on how theory works and its consequences is what matters. This becomes the standard for action and thought. Theories are instruments also to help navigate, interpret, and respond to complex situations, not end goals or rigid frameworks. So when we apply this instrumentalist view or the theory to planning, for example, in spatial analysis and concepts, may not accurately reflect reality. So in planning, analytical models or spatial concepts are only as valuable as their ability to help planners make effective decisions and achieve practical results. So also there is recognition that no model or theory can perfectly capture the complexity of real world situations. So that's about instrumentalist view. And the guiding principle of instrumentalism is results are what count. What matters is what works. So this is the central maxim, or this central maxim captures the pragmatic orientation of instrumentalism. So it means that value is judged by outcomes and utility, not by theoretical purity. So we can continue here. So of course, there's always a critique um, of each theory. Um, so John Dewey, okay, um, the critique to John Dewey's view of planning or the instrumentalist view of planning is when there's no overall theory, okay, or general principle that guide inquiry, actions tend to become so this, and this. So it means that there are specific issues identified within the theory. It said that um, it becomes, or without an overarching framework or unified approach, planning efforts may lack cohesion, actions may be disconnected from one another, resulting in a patchwork of decisions that do not continue or do not contribute to a consistent or strategic action. So that's being disjointed, segmented, incoherent, and unintegrated. Then actions are casuistic, case-to-case basis, means that decisions are made on a case-to-case or ad hoc basis rather than being guided by set of clear, consistent principles. So this casuistic approach risks inconsistency, unpredictability, and even unfairness as each situation is handled in isolation. And over time, decisions will tend to negate or nullify each other amidst changing circumstances and evolving conditions of the landscape, meaning that um, because decisions are not integrated or aligned with a larger vision or strategy, they may end up contradicting each other as situation and even reversal of progress, especially in dynamic or rapidly changing environments. So the critique of the instrumentalist view is that while it values results and pragmatism, lack of unifying theory or guiding principle can lead to this, and this. Okay? So um these are not the benefits, but it's a critique that there's if there's no overall theory or guiding principle that guide inquiry, actions tend to become this, and this. So we go to the next. Still on incremental instrument. So we have another one. Incremental planning. Please remember the equivalent terms. So incremental planning, we know what's incremental, but it's also called disjointed. Okay, it's disjointed incrementalism. So it's the negative view. And Charles Lindblom, he was known for describing planning as the science of modeling through. It's a very popular uh, framework that Charles Lindblom had theorized. So it's also referred to as disjointed incrementalism, or there's another thing. It's also called partisan mutual adjustment. So one, two, disjointed, and three. Okay, madali lang yan. Incremental um, planning is also called disjointed incrementalism, but it's also called partisan mutual adjustment. So um, it said here, unified public interest cannot be defined. Instead, it is determined through negotiation and political compromises. So there's in reality there is rarely a single clear or unified public interest that all stakeholders agree upon. What counts as the public good emerges from ongoing negotiations on competing interests and practical compromises among diverse actors. Then, a plan is determined through politics. Planner acts as mediator to determine common interest. So, according to Lindblom, planning is fundamentally a political process. The planner's role is not to impose technical solutions, but to mediate, facilitate, and help stakeholders reach a workable common ground. So he's trying to um, make some emphasis on the role of the planner also, but also made a strong point that it is the plan is determined through politics. Um, so at times, planning becomes a practice of what's feasible politically instead of what is technically efficient and effective. So, Charles Lindblom also articulated that practical plans are often shaped more by what's acceptable Okay, I think nawala ako na. So what was the last um item?
Plan is determined through politics, ma'am. Regarding common grounds and common interests.
Paantay lang po saglit. Paantay lang po saglit ha, nawalan po ng signal si Ma'am Ana.
Narinig. Naririnig niyo na ako?
Yes po.
Okay. Sound din. So I'll share again. I'll share my screen. Okay, can you see this one? Okay. I think I'm already here, right? Dito na ako sa last. So, policy decisions are better understood and better arrived at in terms of the push and tug of established institutions that are adept at getting things done through the centralized bargaining processes best suited to a free market and democratic political economy. So the incremental approach values small adaptive steps shaped by bargaining and adjustment among institutions and stakeholders. This process, characterized by push and tug, is well suited to democratic societies and market economies, where compromise and gradual progress are necessary and normal. So I think we are here. Okay. Then I continue that because here, okay, it is a continuation of incremental planning. Also, policymakers have cognitive limits. That's what the thinkers say, or that's their assumption. So they cannot optimize decision making. So optimize decision making means the best possible decision. So they can only satisfy, meaning they can only compromise. So instead they satisfy. So this is a term meaning they settle for a solution that's good enough or acceptable rather than ideal. And this is essentially a form of compromise. And then hence decision making is a succession of approximations. Rather than making perfect once and for all decisions, planners, according to Lindblom, planners and policymakers proceed through a series of adjustments and incremental changes, each moving a little closer to workable solutions. There are also two thinkers here, named here, Mel Weber, tatlo pala. Mel Weber, Robert Dahl, and Amitai Etzioni. Mel Weber, according to Mel Weber, planning has to be pluralistic. So Mel Weber argues that planning must embrace pluralism, recognizing and engaging with the diversity of interests, perspectives, and values present in society. While Robert Dahl, so there's a big difference here, is a key figure, or he was an advocate of pluralism, meaning that um, he theorized, or he is within the theory of pluralism, or he was a key figure in the theory of pluralism, which maintains that power and decision making are and should be distributed among many competing groups rather than concentrated in a single authority. So Amita Zioni, she theorized mixed scanning, which is he, according to him, according to Etzioni, was a third approach to decision making. Amita Etzioni introduced the concept of mixed scanning as a synthesis of comprehensive or rational. Comprehensive means rational and incremental approaches. Mixed scanning involves using broad general exploration. General exploration means when you're scanning, okay, to set the direction and identify options. So followed by focused detailed analysis, which points out to narrow scanning, general and narrow, so for specific choices. So this provides a practical and flexible framework for decision making under complexity and uncertainty. Incremental planning, or disjointed incrementalism, accepts the realities of limited knowledge, time, and resources. So it promotes a process of continuous adjustment and compromise. Again, we have Charles Lindblom, and then Mel Weber, Robert Dahl, and Amitai Zioni within this framework. So, systems theory of planning, it was theorized by Norbert Wiener in 1948, and then followed by Ashby, because there are two theorists here, by Ashby and by Wiener and Ashby. And they define cybernetics as an interdisciplinary science focused on communication and control systems in living organisms, machines, and organizations. And then another one is that they define system as a set of group, or is a set or group of interconnected components interacting to form a unity or integrated whole. And also system or relationships, or relationships tie the system together. So Norbert's father of cybernetics. So siguro hindi natin pwedeng kalimutan na we need to recall them pag matanong yan sa board exam. So recognized as the father of cybernetics, he developed foundational concepts for understanding systems through feedback and control. While Ashby, W. Ross Ashby, in 1956 expanded on cybernetics, which Norbert Wiener established or developed. Okay, he expanded that, but emphasizing regulation and stability in complex systems. So you can see the linear, okay, here, crude depiction of linear system. We have input, throughput, input, throughput, and then so the input there could include resources, energy, or information entering the system. And then throughput is the transformation or processing that occurs within the system, while the output are the product, service, or result that exists or that exits the system. Cyclical system was or is described as a free-flowing circuit, where output is not the end point but can feedback as input, creating a continuous loop. So I think it's easy to remember cyclical, or the first one is crude depiction of linear. So it's a linear system. Then it says here it flows, or it can involve the flow of energy or matter, as well as the flow of information feedback. So it's kind of it related to the flow of energy. Um, and 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 so in this particular diagram, it is telling us that information feedback is crucial for system regulation, adaptation, improvement, etc. So iteration here, still in this context, in systems and planning, iteration means executing the same set of instructions repeatedly or adjusting the process until a specified result is obtained. Okay, so that one. And within the iteration process, this reflects the Okay, apologies for that. I changed my connection. So you can see again, right? Okay. So where was I? So I was saying earlier, this is the model of a cybernetic system that um the system's theory of planning applies the logic of cybernetics to planning, treating plans and policies as dynamic systems that require feedback, adaptation, and coordination of multiple components. And um, so if you need, for example, applications to urban, environmental, or organizational planning, or wish to link to current technologies like smart cities, GIS, digital twins. Um, so this is one of the important theory that we can leverage on. But of course, here is a diagram or that can show you, or that I can this presents the system's approach to planning, showing how each step builds on the previous and forms a continuous cycle of analysis, decision, and adjustment. So under system description, uh, we scan, we profile, we provide, we establish or we formulate goal formulation. So the initial step is to describe the system. This one. This involves collecting and analyzing data that refers to what we call scanning, because we are uh, collecting either or a combination of primary and secondary data, and then we analyze them. So that's scanning, and developing a detailed profile of the current situation, and clearly formulating the goals that the planning process aims to achieve. So system modeling here involve, or in this phase, system modeling, projection of goals, forecasting, scenario building. Okay, so in this phase, planners model the system by projecting goals, forecasting trends, and constructing scenarios that represent different possible futures. So modeling helps to visualize outcomes and understand the potential impact of different actions. System projection, evaluation of scenarios and projections. So here planners evaluate scenarios and projections developed in the modeling stage. This involves analyzing what each scenario means for the achievement of goals, the use of resources, and the management of risks. And then system synthesis it involves evaluation of alternatives or interventions. So you compare and evaluate alternative strategies. Planners select the best or most feasible alternative or alternatives based on evidence, forecasts, and value judgments. System control here are involve evaluation of performances. This is the final phase that you can monitor outcomes, measure effectiveness, and assessing whether goals are being met. So this evaluation provides feedback, which is then used to adjust strategies and goals in an ongoing cyclical process. This is another model it is a systems approach model by George Chadwick. And it it showed the key components and sequence here, like problem finding involves this and this. So goal formulation, we articulate the aims and or objectives that the plan intends to achieve. Then system description, here we conduct kanina, di ba? System description. So we conduct a thorough scan, profiling and analysis of the current system to understand the existing situation and context. These are okay because of this arrow here. Yeah, these are two steps are closely linked. Okay. Goals should be informed by a clear understanding of the current system, and description may need to be revisited as goals evolve. Projection of goals, okay, and system modeling. So when we project goals, we define the specific targets and forecast where the achievement of these goals will lead. While system modeling, we develop models that stimulate or simulate the possible outcomes and scenarios resulting from various courses of action. Okay, projection of goals and so evaluation of projection and system projection. So what's the difference there, or how do they? Because this one also involves the whole range of feedback. So evaluation of projection, we assess the plausibility, risks, and potential impacts of the projected goals. So system projection leverages or uses models to forecast and analyze different future scenarios, providing evidence for decision making. Evaluation of alternatives. So evaluation of alternatives, I already explained earlier. Evaluation of alternatives. Okay. Yeah, we systematically compare different strategies, pathways, or interventions that might achieve the goals. While system synthesis, we integrate insights from projections and alternatives to propose the best options. In evaluating performance, we monitor outcomes and measure the effectiveness of implemented actions. And what's the role of system control here is to make adjustments as necessary, ensuring the plan remains on track and responsive to feedback and concrete changes. So at every stage here, there are feedback loops. So meaning that it demonstrates how information from later steps can lead back to earlier stages for adjustment and refinement. And this ensures adaptability, learning, and ongoing improvement. So feedback into problem finding is done, or ultimately evaluation of performance and new information may reveal new problems or redefine the original problem, starting the cycle again. So that's the systems approach by George Chadwick. Now we go to John Friedman's theory of planning. So what are the key points here? Planning promotes human growth by the use of rational procedures, or of thought, and action. This means that planning relies on logical, systematic processes to analyze problems, evaluate alternatives, and guide decisions. So if you're following previous discussions, and so it is just reiterating one after another, but while we are running through the different theories here, and there's similarities, and there are also connect or there are differences, but please try to capture the context of each of the theory of planning. So the objective, okay, is to identify the best way of attaining needs, to ensure that development and public action are efficient, effective, and aligned with societal values. It also, John Friedman also wrote here, or theorized, that planning is deeply concerned with the relation of goals to collective decisions. Okay, goals to collective decisions, and strives for comprehensiveness in policy and programs. So this highlights the importance of inclusivity, shared decision making, and the integration of multiple sectors and interests in planning practice. John Friedman also theorized that all planning must confront the meta theoretical problem of how to make technical knowledge effective in informing public actions. So this acknowledges a fundamental challenge, how to translate specialized expert knowledge into policies and actions that are relevant, accepted, and workable in the public arena. So public planning is the links the component that links technical knowledge with actions in the public domain. Planning, here, John Friedman theorized that planning serves as the bridge between expertise and those realistic impact, or real impacts, or true impacts, connecting what we know, meaning science, data, best practice, with what society does, such as policy making, program implementation, reform, etc. So Friedman's model here, so it shows here this 1 and 2, okay, that knowledge policies action provides for a interrelationship, or pertaining to technical and empirical knowledge that informs the creation of policies. Then also that policies guide and enable concrete action, or concrete action. So actions in turn generate experience and data that feedback into knowledge, creating a continuous cycle of learning and adaptation. Here, in the second diagram, second cycle here are, okay, social learning, social reform, social mobilization. Social learning involves communities and stakeholders understanding and adapting to change. The social reform is the process of implementing changes in response to learning and mobilization. So social mobilization engages people in collective action, which both drives and responds to learning and reform, creating a dynamic process for societal transformation. So if you try to read about John Friedman, you would find that. So Friedman's radical theory emphasizes that planning um, is primarily a technical or bureaucratic function. Also, it's an active, socially engaged process that connects rational procedures, knowledge, and collective action to achieve public goals. It recognizes the necessity of continuous feedback, learning, and adaptation in both knowledge-based and socially driven planning. Still on John Friedman's radical theory of planning, social actions. So let's try to read that. Social action is needed to promote interest of disadvantage. So you can really feel the radical nature of what he meant here, that Friedman, that social, according to John Friedman, social action is needed to promote interests of disadvantage. That Friedman's theory positions planning as an instrument for social action. Okay. With a moral imperative to advance the interests of marginalized or disadvantaged groups. So action, activist, mobilization. So it's a Friedman theorized that effective planning moves from passive action to activist engagement and ultimately to mobilization, meaning organizing and energizing communities to participate actively in social change. Friedman's 5 key roles of planning here, 1, 2, 3, okay. Friedman identifies 5 important aspects where planning plays a role. Okay. He theorized every planning activity involves a territorial or spatial component, that all planning is grounded in the management and organization of space, whether it's urban, regional, or rural. That decisions have concrete implications for land use, spatial equity, and the distribution of opportunities. Planning activities respond to a social rationality. So, okay. Kanina, space, territorial, spatial component here, social rationality. Unlike purely technical or economic approaches, Friedman emphasizes the need for social rationality. What he meant by that was planning should be shaped by collective values, public debate, and societal goals, not just technical expertise. Then another here, planning facilitates market activities while restricting noxious ones or even substituting the market in others. So planning, he theorized that planning can support and enable market operations, but also plays a regulatory role by curbing harmful activities such as pollution, unsafe housing, etc. And where necessary, providing alternatives to market mechanisms such as public services or government intervention. Planning in the public domain is conflictive and therefore political. So I advise you need to be very familiar with these 5 important aspects where planning plays a role according to John Friedman. So that's radical theory of planning. So the process of planning according to Friedman is inherently conflictual because it deals with competing interests, scarce resources, and divergent visions. As such, planning is deeply political, requiring negotiation, compromise, and at times confrontation. So, Friedman, in his fifth role, planning requires or fifth aspect here, planning requires massive support and ability to mobilize society in order to be successful. Massive support. So, according to Friedman, for planning to be effective, it must engage, mobilize, and earn the support of the wider society because Friedman thought large scale large scale change is not possible without public participation, activism, and shared ownership of plans and policies. So still the same here, like those diagrams. So we go to more radical views. That's advocacy planning. Um, so okay, I think you're more familiar with um, Paul Davidoff. Paul Davidoff. Uh, activist okay, advocacy pertains to activist or advocacy planning. Planners should advocate for those who are powerless and disenfranchised. Goals are social justice and equity in housing, provision of services, environment. So that's the view in in the lens. Sorry for the noise. So in the lens of activist or advocacy planning. So the goals here is the main aims are social justice, equity in housing, provision services, and the environment. And so planners, according to Paul Davidoff, should take active role in promoting fairness and justice for marginalized communities. So again, just to articulate, okay. So when we when Davidoff said that planners are expected to work for the redistribution of power and resources, and this means defending the interests of the weak and the poor against the established powers of business and government. Planner, and he also mentioned in his book that the planner is not neutral but intentionally aligns with those who are often excluded from decision making and benefits. So he advocates for that. So can we do that? So Paul Davidoff in 1965. So he was recognized as the father of advocacy planning. So I hope you will remember. Okay, he's the father of advocacy planning. It also mentioned because there are articles that points out that the former president Barack Obama, not when he was president, but when he was active in his community development work in Chicago. Um, so his work inspired community development models. I mean, public Paul Davidoff. Um, so his work inspired community development models, including those associated with Barack Obama in his early career in Chicago. And, Davidoff called for the development of plural plans rather than a unitary plan. So plural plans. This means that instead of a single supposedly objective plan, there should be, according to Davidoff, there should be multiple plans reflecting different interests, especially those of the underrepresented. He argued that public interest is not scientific but is political. It arises from negotiation, conflict, and advocacy, not from detached technical analysis. So that those were his views. So here, okay, victim, hero, villain. So this is the problem. So that was the representation of his advocacy. That okay, that it illustrated that the advocacy planners, I mean, that every planning, okay, every planning issue involves different stakeholders, including victims. Victims here are represented by the disadvantaged, villains, those with power who perpetuate problems, and potential heroes, tayo, planners or activists advocating for justice. O heroes, di ba? Planners or activists. So I'm not inventing words here, but this came from his that planners or activists advocating for justice. So advocacy planning asserts that planners have a responsibility to speak and act for those who cannot do so themselves. So our profession, according to Paul Davidoff, must take sides in the struggle for justice. So that was his advocacy, promoting pluralism and contesting the status quo to ensure the needs and rights of the most vulnerable are met. So go to the next one. Saul David Alinsky, so is more radical. He wrote the book Rules for Radicals in 1971. So he was known for conflict pragmatics or conflict confrontation as a philosophy in community organizing. He emphasizes victimization of the last, the least, and the lost in society. So I think it's something that you really know, the last, the least, and the lost. I remember Lenny Robredo when he was campaigning in his in her presidential campaign. So he also put emphasis on the last, the least, and the lost. So here, it came from Saul David Alinsky that he highlighted victimization of the last, the least, and the lost in his work. So, he advocated for anarcho-syndicalist, community organizing, and mosquito-like mass mobilization that confronts the state and dares the state to live up to its own principles, but without Marxist or Maoist ideology of taking over the state. So, is it difficult to remember? So, mass mobilization at the grassroots level. And this his advocacy was designed to confront the state and pressure it to uphold its own stated principles and responsibilities. And so he called this approach as explicitly not about violent revolution or Marxist Maoist takeover, but about compelling change through organized activism and holding power to account. There's another one, Sherry Arnstein. She wrote 8 Rungs in the Ladder of Participation, I think I also explained about the 8 ranks because it's worth it that you really need to get to know them more, so we can also use their theories as applicable. So she developed the influential model. That's the model 8 ranks in the ladder of citizen participation in 1969. And this framework classifies different degrees of public involvement in planning. So uh, because it's about the ladder of citizen participation. So she described that as a framework from non-participation and tokenism to actual citizen power and control. Uh, so her work is was foundational for thinking about participation, empowerment, and the democratization of planning processes. Alan Heskin also, in 1977, wrote concepts of, or he advanced the concepts of empowerment in planning, emphasizing the need for marginalized groups to have agency and capacity in shaping decisions that affect their lives. Norman Krumholtz, he was the originator, okay, of transactive planning. Again, they were written here in the slide because they're important, okay, to remember for your preparation. Norman Krauss, so he was the originator of transactive planning, which stresses dialogue and mutual learning between planners and communities. He served as president of the American Institute of Certified Planners. So Krumholtz's approach is highly participatory, focusing on learning from citizens and stakeholders rather than simply imposing expert solutions. Thomas Rayner, he was known for a choice theory of planning. This perspective holds that planning must provide and clarify real choices for people, recognizing diverse needs and values in society. How about David Mazziotti? He wrote the underlying assumptions of advocacy planning. So his work examined the philosophical and ethical foundations that underpin advocacy planning, helping to clarify its goals, responsibilities, and methods. So advocacy planning is supported and developed by a diverse group of thinkers who champion social justice, citizen empowerment, pluralism, participation, and dialogue. And these contributions have shaped planning as a political, ethical, and practical tool for achieving equity and amplifying the voices of the marginalized. So I proceed to the next, communicative planning or communicative planning, however you wish to pronounce it. Frankfurt School of Social. So these are the foundations. Frankfurt School of Social Critical Theory. The origins of communicative planning are rooted in critical social theory, particularly the ideas developed by the Frankfurt School. So Jürgen Habermas was recognized as the last of the great modernists. Habermas, along with his followers in North America, such as John Forster, Anthony Giddens, Patsy Lee, Innes, and D. Hill, has profoundly shaped the direction of community planning theory and practice. So, what were the core ideas in communicative planning? First, transactive. Transactive, not transactional. Okay, transactive. Okay. So rather than, it says here, rather than transactional. Communicative planning is described as transactive, which is a dialectical to and fro process. This means planning is not a one-way transmission of decisions, but a dialogue, a negotiation, and an exchange of perspectives. The emphasis is on finding common ground and common aspirations among conflicting groups or divergent traditions. So planners facilitate meaningful discourse so that despite differences, communities and stakeholders can work toward shared goals. Then contrast to transactional here, why it's transactive and not transactional, because the transactional approach in contrast involves casuistic compromises, meaning ad hoc deals or settlements made for short-term benefit without addressing underlying values or fostering long-term agreement. So communicative planning, as influenced by Habermas, the Frankfurt School, is fundamentally about participation, consensus building, and mutual understanding. It moves beyond mere bargaining or making a deal or deal making to create lasting agreement and common visions in complex pluralistic society. So, uh, yeah, just to continue on this type of planning or theory in planning. So, institutional oppression limits ability of all institutional oppression, limits ability of all to have their interests met. Group interest has to be determined through dialogue. So, it is just trying to emphasize here that structures and systems, what are these? The institutions, laws, power relations, can prevent some groups from having their needs and voices recognized. So as a result, group interest has to be determined through dialogue. No single authority or group can legitimately define the common good without inclusive participatory discussion. So this is within the theory of communicative planning. So dialogue between systems of rationality, economics, science, capitalism, technology, and the life world, sphere of family, culture, non-monetary values. So, system of, okay. So this one is governed by, these are the domains, okay? Economic science and capitalism technology are the domains governed by logic, efficiency, and instrumental reasoning. While the life world represents the sphere of family, culture, tradition, and non-monetary values, these are the domains where meaning, identity, and everyday life are constructed. So communicative planning bridges these two by facilitating conversations that respect both technical and scientific reasoning and lived cultural experience. So rational dialogue based on trust, intersectoral collaboration, inclusivity, deliberative democracy. It that it's a this context is on the true communicative planning, which requires trust, intersectoral collaboration, inclusivity, deliberative democracy. So, we know what's trust, we know what's intersectoral collaboration, meaning involving stakeholders from various fields and backgrounds. When we say inclusive, we ensure all voices, especially marginalized ones, are heard. And then the deliberate deliberative democracy is collective reasoned discussion leading to legitimate shared decisions. So, so we can conclude probably, yeah, we can conclude now that communicative planning recognizes it's the lived reality of sectors of society. So here, feminist perspectives and planning. So just a moment. I think I'll go off na itong iPad. So, it's the moment. Mag-off na. So let me continue that. So feminist perspective and planning. There are critic. Okay. Okay. So it's defined here. Feminists criticize settlements planning as being created by men. So the patriarchal culture, who shared certain assumptions about how cities operate and represent a partial view of urban life. This life is partial view of urban life. One that does not fully capture the diversity of needs and experiences, especially those women and marginalized groups. So the assumptions in let's wait for Jen to. Okay, so now okay now. Okay, all right. This trade-off often overlooks the realities and constraints faced by women, such as ano yung nasabi ko kanina, care work, limited mobility, and safety concerns. So it's also said here, traditional planning models assume a spatial separation of workplace and home. So, well, historically, these models have separated places of employment from places of residence. But this assumption is no longer appropriate as it fails to address the needs of households where caregiving and paid work are both essential and often interwoven, especially for women. So, also within this perspective, with feminist perspectives and planning, models tend to reflect an urban structure that isolates women who do not participate in the urban labor market. We don't really feel this in Philippines, but for other countries. So let me continue this perspective. Within this one, urban plans and zoning may be implicitly biased towards the needs and patterns of those engaged in formal employment, disregarding or marginalizing the needs of women and others who may not work outside the home, such as homemakers, caregivers, or informal sector workers. And so this can lead to physical and social isolation, lack of access to services and urban forms that are not responsive to urban or responsive to all users. So um, to continue the feminist perspective and planning, because this are talking about history and theory, and so these are uh, historical perspectives or based on history in urban planning. So to continue this one, restricted access to public spaces. Feminist critics have suggested that one major reason for women's relatively restricted access to a range of public spaces is the prevailing assumption that women are in need of protection from the perceived dangers and chaos. So the Harley Burley or of the public sphere. And so the assumption positions women as inherently vulnerable and in need of safeguarding, which leads to planning and design choices that limit their movement, presence, and participation in public environment or arenas. So the persistent societal view that women are dependent on men, both economically and morally, further shapes planning outcomes and the use of public space. But then again, uh, personally, my personal view is that in Philippines we have strong laws and policies already, like also jurisprudence that prove women are indeed fighting for their space. And so even the equal protection laws under the Bill of Rights, okay, uh that well one of the one of the expressed or examples that fall under the equal protection laws is the mm, men and women, as they're not they are not equally treated, because it is deemed that women are still the what's this we're not equally situated, men and women, so and therefore we have to be treated like women should be treated more special. So but there are already laws that are favoring or that still fighting for equality in the um different contexts. Okay. And so this narrative, uh here, if we go back to the feminist perspectives and planning, that it said that there's a persistent societal view that women are dependent on men, both economically and morally. And this narrative undermines women's agency and autonomy, reinforcing the idea that women's place is primarily in the private domestic sphere, and that their activities in public should be supervised, restricted, or guarded. So this no longer persists in Philippines, but in other countries, it still persists. But we are talking about history and theory, so we need to just take it um, as a fact regarding all these feminist perspectives and planning. So, okay, these are, I leave this to you here. I think this one. Mm, yeah, bilisan ko siya so that we will reach those more likely to be asked in the board exam, the more the higher likelihood of being asked again in your board exam 2025. So the planning process, okay, here so it's cyclical. And when you engage partners. So the generic, okay, this is generic one because it's not attributed to like this one, Francis Stuart Chapin. This one is quite, so it is, e- each theory is being introduced by a generic illustration. So when we engage partners and build consensus here in step one, because it's trying to illustrate that it is indeed the planning process is cyclical, so or cyclical. The process begins by that bringing together stakeholders, partners, and key actors, and such that building consensus ensures that there is shared ownership, commitment, and a clear understanding of the planning purpose. So assess needs, assets, and capacities. It's a conduct of thorough assessment of what's required, um, referring to the needs, and then what resources and strengths are available, the assets and the abilities or capabilities of stakeholders. So this diagnostic step grounds the plan and real world conditions. So step three, formulate goals and strategies. So based on assessment, okay, based on assessment here, um, develop it. Step three involves developing clear, actionable goals. Also to identify goals and strategies. So identify strategies to achieve these goals, ensuring that the stakeholders' needs are aligned. Okay, stakeholders' needs and aspirations are aligned. Then step four, um, evaluate scenarios and test alternative options. We explore in this stage. We explore possible futures through scenario evaluation. Also, there's a need to test alternative approaches to determine um, which strategies are most visible, effective, and responsive to identified needs. So, number five, relate to wider public goals, okay, and collective values. So, to win broad support for chosen strategy. So, there are tools also that require stakeholders, to play a unique and more engaging role in selecting a strategy. So there are tools, I think GAM and many more should be we find ourselves using this also, these tools. So step five is positioning the selected strategy within the broader context for public goals, or within the broader context of public goals, collective values, and community aspirations. So this step is crucial for gaining legitimacy, building alliances, and ensuring sustained support. Then six is implement selected strategy, meaning through programming, okay, and execution. The we move from planning to action by programming and executing the chosen strategy. Then we assign responsibilities, mobilize resources, and carry out activities according to the plan. Then monitor, evaluate, and review plan, which is, it said here, it emphasizes self-correction. It involves continuously monitoring uh or yeah, continuously monitor progress, evaluate outcomes, and review the plans. So it also it is also it has emphasized that there is a need to use feedback to make adjustments, learn from experience, and initiate a new cycle of planning if necessary. So the cyclical nature of the planning process ensures adaptability, learning, and responsiveness to changing conditions. And by repeatedly cycling through these steps, planners can refine their approaches and achieve better, more sustainable outcomes over time. So now, from the generic planning process, which it's still cyclical. So please remember also Francis Stuart Chapin's planning process. So it looks like all this on the cyclical, but let's see how is it different from other planning process. So this process by Francis Stuart Chapin is a classic cyclical model that underscores the iterative nature of planning. It provides a systematic sequence of steps, ensuring that planning is adaptive and responsive to both initial goals and the results. So, scanning environment, okay, so you already know this one. We begin by observing and analyzing the environment, gather related information about current conditions, trends, challenges, and opportunities. So environmental scanning provides because it's specific about the environment. So environmental scanning provides the factual basis for setting realistic and responsive goals. So formulate goals based on insights from the scan, set clear and achievable goals. So goals articulate what the planning process aims to accomplish. These steps translate environmental data and community aspirations into concrete targets. Determine courses of action. We identify various. So Francis Stuart Chapin, uh, yeah, established or presented that there is a need to identify various strategies or approaches that could be used to achieve the set goals. This step involves brainstorming or mapping out possible directions the plan might take, then evaluate courses of action through available means. This is critically assessing the feasibility, cost, benefits, and potential impacts of each course of action. So evaluation uses available resources and tools to judge which options are most practical and likely to succeed. Then taking action, we select the most promising course of action and implement it. So action translates planning into concrete programs, projects, or policy measures, then review the plan. After implementation, systematically review and assess results. We also determine if the action taken are achieving the desired goals or if modifications are necessary. So this step creates a feedback loop, putting new insights back into the next round of environmental scanning. So JP's process highlights planning as a continuous adaptive cycle, and each phase leads logically to the next with regular review, ensuring that planning remains relevant and effective in changing circumstances. So Brian McLaughlin, okay, so it is a different diagram here or configuration. Brian McLaughlin provided these steps, decision to adopt planning. The process begins with a conscious and formal decision to engage in planning. Okay, So this step marks the organizational or governmental commitment to undertake a systematic planning process. Then goal formulation, identification of objectives. Um, this is where planners articulate what they aim to achieve and set measurable targets for the plan. Then study of possible course of action with aid of models. Here, planners, as per Brian McLaughlin's planning process, planners explore various possible courses of action to achieve the identified goals. And the use of models here, okay, are those that are quantitative, qualitative, or both. So the use of models support analysis or supports analysis simulation and forecasting of outcomes for each alternative course of action. Evaluation of alternatives by reference to values and cost or benefits. So here all proposed alternatives are evaluated systematically, and evaluation is based on values, means alignment with community or societal principles and goals, then costs and benefits, assessment of economic, social, and environmental trade-offs. So this stage ensures that chosen actions are rational, evidence-based, and aligned with broader priorities. Then action through public investment or control or over private investment. So after evaluation, the selected plan is implemented. So implementation can occur either via public investment, meaning government projects, infrastructure programs, etc. Then it it can also occur through control over private investment. So through regulations, control over investment refer to the regulations, incentives, land use controls, etc. Then, so review. Okay, review here. Okay, this one. Review or monitoring of state system. So this is a feedback mechanism that the system is observed to determine if objectives are being met and if conditions have changed. So results feedback into the planning cycle, prompting adjustments or a new round of planning as needed. So McLaughlin's model is a systematic, stepwise, and cyclical process. It emphasizes rational decision making, the use of analytical models and or cost benefit and value assessments, and continuous feedback. So the process is indeed dynamic. So monitoring and review was emphasized here to ensure plans remain relevant and responsive to real world conditions. There's another here by Alan Wilson's linear. So the word linear there, not cyclical, okay? Linear planning process. So Alan Wilson's model presents planning as a linear process where each step builds on the previous one. The process is organized in a way that links specific sets of activities and analytical stages to three key outputs: policy, design, understanding. So for the techniques, okay. Here, so we need to start. If you notice the arrow going up there, so in the step by step process here, the process begins with the selection of and application of techniques. These are the tools and methods planners use for data collection, analysis of problem solving. Then system models are making use of techniques. Planners also develop or employ system models, or where planners develop or employ system models, then these models help to represent and understand complex relationships, flows, and feedbacks within the area or sector being planned. Then problem formulation is to formulate, or clearly here is making use of the insights. Okay, just a moment. Design. Okay, so this is design. So there's a need to formulate the problem, okay, clearly using the insights gained from systems modeling. So it came from here, so it goes there. So then design techniques. So with a clear problem definition or formulation, planners can move to design techniques. These are methods for generating, testing, and refining alternative solutions. So in the next step, there is plan formulation that integrates, or plan formulation integrates chosen design alternatives into a coherent plan. This is where the overall strategy for addressing the problem is articulated. Then evaluation. Here, plans are subjected to evaluation to assess their feasibility, effectiveness, and impacts. So evaluation ensures the plan meets set goals and community standards. Goals here are based on evaluation results. Planners define or refine goals, meaning specific outcomes. The plan it refers to the specific outcomes the plan seeks to achieve. Then action. Finally, the process culminates in action, where we should find the implementation, or where implementation of plans and policies occur. So the understanding here, so if you go back there to the outputs and linkages, understanding, we need the outputs should be techniques, system models, and problem formulation stages also. No, the up to system models. So this is the foundation, or the foundation for sound analysis and good planning. And in the design output, this emerges from problem formulation, design techniques, and plan formulation. And this phase is about creatively developing and integrating solutions. So the policy output is informed by evaluation, goal setting and action, and policy guides the decision making and resource allocation needed for implementation. So Wilson's model emphasizes a systematic, rational progression from technical analysis to implementation, with a clear distinction between understanding the problem, designing the solutions, and formulating policy for action. Each phase is necessary for a robust planning process and effective plan outcomes. Then, so anyway, konting tulog na lang and you're taking the board. And so I just have to finish, okay? This is quite easy because you can relate anyway that, okay, under the traditional planning approach, we have the master plan or this is also called master plan approach. Okay. Master plan. Also, para hindi niyo makalimutan, I will just or imperative planning. Anyway, nandyan naman. So, and this approach is characterized as a grand one-shot, okay, grand one-shot attempt to shape the future of a city or territory. And the end product is long range, typically designed for 20 to 40 years, influencing the trajectory of an entire generation. So, while ambitious and comprehensive, this method can be massively disastrous when in error. So, that's the one. Okay, meaning a single miscalculation or flawed vision may have wide-reaching negative effects over decades. So it requires full control and full powers to sovereign. Okay, so okay. Now, the effective implementation of a master plan demands full control and the full powers of sovereign or an authority figure who authorizes and enforces the plan. So without such authority, the plan's directives may not be followed and its objectives may not be realized. So I also this one. Sorry, I moved that. Okay, ito yan. Run one shot at 10. 20-40 years affecting one whole generation. That can be massive. Okay. So top down, uh, or implementing only the dominant vision or an authoritative leader or clique. Okay. The master plan approach tends to be top down, with planning and decision making centralized in the hands of a single, often charismatic leader, as exemplified by Daniel Barnham, or a small clique. The plan commonly implements only. So, what's a small clique? So, it comprises a small group of pow- powerful people, or a small circle of people in power. So the plan commonly implements only the dominant vision of an authoritative leader or group, with limited opportunities for input from other stakeholders or the general public. So the traditional planning approach, also known as imperative or master planning, is defined by its comprehensive long-term vision, centralized authority, and top-down execution. While it can set the stage for transformational change, its risks are significant. So any errors or oversights are magnified by the scale and time span of the planning. So, yeah, here, it's said here, strong on physical planning, comprehensive in terms of physical design, architecture, engineering, etc., but inadequate in terms of social and other forms of analysis. So the traditional approach excels in the technical aspects of physical planning, focusing on spatial layout, architecture, infrastructure, and engineering. However, it's often inadequate when it comes to integrating social analysis, economic considerations, and participatory or interdisciplinary approaches. It tends to be atavistic, pining on or for a throwback, or classical or neoclassical. Just a moment. Throwback or classical or neoclassical golden age in the distant past. Okay. So the planning ideals are drawn from the past rather than adapting to present realities and future needs. So seems to be more applicable, okay? More applicable in planning tabula rasa. So it's important to know tabula rasa, meaning starting from a blank slate or starting from scratch with unoccupied land. So those are the keywords. So when there's empty land and no people occupying it, but not when cities are already settled. Wherein public consent has to be solicited. Okay. So it is much less suited to contexts where cities are already established and populations are present, since public consent has to be solicited and people's needs, rights, and voices must be considered. So imposing a top-down master plan or settled communities often leads to resistance and implementation challenges. So, rational, we're now here. So, traditional planning approach. So, please also remember rational, adaptive, comprehensive, or synoptic planning. Okay, so here you can say RAC. Okay, RAC. Rational, adaptive, comprehensive, or synoptic planning. So uses reason more intensively, rational or scientific tools. So this planning approach is grounded in the intensive use of reason, systematic analysis, and evidence. So it relies on scientific tools such as data gathering, modeling, forecasting, and evaluation, and to guide decision making, ensuring that plans are logical and justifiable. Adjust or adapts to local demands, limitations, and peculiarities. Okay. Um. So adaptive element was influenced by the tenet of systems theory. So I hope you will remember this one, okay? So I just explained, or I just discussed systems theory. So the adaptive nature is heavily influenced by systems theory, embracing the reality that conditions are always changing and effective plans must be flexible and responsive. So it has roots in Guedes. Okay, please remember, it has roots in Guedes survey analysis plan, and so it has this sub. Theoretically benefits me the whole of society and the larger natural environment. So the origins of this approach can be traced again. It can be traced to Patrick Guedes' survey analysis plan method, which emphasizes the systematic study of the environment, meaning survey, understanding and interpreting the findings, means analysis, and developing the plans based on this knowledge. So the intent is to produce plans that are beneficial not only for specific groups but for the entirety of the society and the natural environment, aligning with holistic and integrative principles. So comprehensive because it tends to cover all bases, all aspects, all sectors, hence overwhelming in terms of information quantity. So the comprehensive element means this approach tries to address all relevant aspects of the planning context: economic, social, physical, environmental, and institutional, among others. So this breadth can be both strength and a challenge. Okay. Planners often face information overload due to the sheer volume and complexity of data and factors that must be considered. So rational, adaptive, comprehensive, or synoptic planning is marked by its rational, evidence-based methodology, its flexibility in adapting to dynamic context, its roots in classical SAP or SAP approaches, and its effort to provide comprehensive, all-encompassing solutions. So while theoretically sound and broad in vision, its main challenges are the demands of processing massive amounts of information and ensuring responsiveness to ongoing change. Okay, so massive, we already done this one. So okay, so here the key challenges is to maintain okay, maintain clarity and focus on not missing essential details, the trees, and while considering the broader context, the forest. So here, challenge is not to miss the trees. We try to capture this one. Challenge is not to miss the trees. Not to miss the trees as you walk through the forest. So what do you mean by that? The trees, okay? While considering the broader context, the trees. So process is long and tedious, realistically not less than 4 months. 4 months. It cannot make quick decisions. So even long, actually more than 4 months. So has a window for participation. So it allows many people from walks of life to contribute. So despite its complexity, this approach creates opportunities for broad-based participation. So public input is sought at various stages, enabling diverse stakeholders from ordinary citizens to technical experts to have a voice in shaping plans. So this participatory aspect can improve legitimacy, inclusiveness, and responsiveness, provided that the process is well facilitated and accessible. So it tends to be static within its own time frame, needs to be constantly updated after each planning period, so every 3 years. Synoptic planning produces plans that are fixed or static. Okay. So okay, because circumstances, technologies, and social needs evolve, these plans must be regularly, okay, revised and updated to remain relevant and effective. So if not updated, the plan risks become obsolete, unresponsive to emerging trends, or disconnected from reality. So it tends to be utopian in its belief that all people are driven by reason and good intentions. So this approach often assumes the stakeholders act logically and with the common good in mind. So it's considered utopian because it presumes that rationality and goodwill will prevail in collective decision making, sometimes underestimating political interests, power struggles, or conflict. But in practice, diverse motivations, values, and constraints can complicate consensus and implementation. Also, it said here, we cannot miss this one. Planner can be likened to an expert scientist, technical specialist, forecaster who's making a prognosis, educating the public on future scenarios. So the role of the planner in this approach is highly specialized and technical based on this theory. And so planners are seen as experts who are responsible for analyzing data, predicting trends, and developing scenarios for the future. So part of the planner's role is to educate the public and decision makers about future challenges and opportunities, helping to shape informed choices based on evidence and projections. So these are already long, but they are indeed important. So it said here, because it's wide open process. It can be dominated by powers that be. Powers that be refers to those with authority or control in the current system, government officials, business elites, political patrons, etc. Invested interests here or by vested interests. These are groups or individuals who stand to gain from particular outcomes. So these actors can manipulate or capture the planning process, shifting its direction to serve their own agendas rather than the public good. So this undermines the okay, this undermines the planner scientist's intended objectivity and weakens the legitimacy of the process. So it also included here, okay, it's a priori goal setting, a priori goal setting, meaning that what? So synoptic planning is criticized for establishing goals Sino yung nawala? Okay. So where did I stop there? Because nawala kanina yung recording and then immediately came back. So I think I mentioned the concept of general public interest is problematic. So it often overlooks the reality that societies are made up of multiple, sometimes conflicting interests, not a single unified public will. So by elevating the role of experts, the process can become overly centralized or controlled by a technocratic elite, potentially sidelining the broader public. So utopian, normative, technocratic, and these are all labels in this approach. So it's rational, adaptive, comprehensive, or synoptic, is rigorous and systematic, but is vulnerable to domination by powerful actors, may oversimplify the complexity of public interest, and can become technocratic or exclusionary if not consciously balanced with pluralist or participatory mechanisms. So, decide to plan. These are the steps in the RAC or synoptic planning. Decide to plan, analyze the situation, formulate goals, identify and design alternative strategies, project and forecast, build scenario simulation modeling, assess alternatives by tracing their consequences, decide select course of action, implement the plan, evaluate the plan, seek feedback for plan review or replanning. So I don't need to these are all easy to understand. Now, this is also another one that another type of problem. Here, decide to plan, okay? Here, still synoptic, but it's another illustration of the RAC or synoptic planning. Here, it made use of the Plan, Do, Check, Act. Plan, ito. Plan, Do, Check, Act. So it's like a PDCA cycle. Okay, cycle. Formulate the problem, formulate goals, identify alternatives, evaluate alternatives, select the best alternative, plan implementation and evaluation. So, and then, but of course, each cycle here, each stage should compose of different activities. Okay, if we relate it here, okay, in PDCA. Also, please don't forget about definition of strategic planning. It's a process of understanding, okay, the types of decisions that need to be made by assessing. So what decisions to be made? That need to be made by assessing opportunities and limitations of the future. And then identifying the short and long-term consequences of alternative choices designed to take advantage of these opportunities or respond to these limitations. So it's also a continuous learning process that defines the purpose of an organization, how it will achieve performance results that lead to its desired state. So another one. Then, okay. There's another his what's his name anyway? He does not need. So here these are the views of Dr. Henry Mintzberg. Okay, here. That particularly referencing the following views: integration with management. So he said, according to Mintzberg, strategic planning is interwoven into management. It's not separate and distinct from the process of strategic management. So sometimes we get to that point of being confused about strategic planning versus strategic management. So and it said there it's not separate and distinct from the process of strategic management. It's interwoven with management and forms an integral part of strategic management. So, and focus of change, because it is characterized by an aggressive pursuit of change through strategies designed to achieve optimal results. Also, exploration of options. All options are explored and the most appropriate option is selected. So the process ensures that all options are considered and the most appropriate option is selected. It does not need comprehensive or voluminous data, but only manageable data or relevant. Only manageable data relevant to strategic issues. So Dr. Henry Mintzberg is noted for his critical analysis of traditional strategic planning models, and he emphasized practical, adaptive, and learning-oriented approaches over rigid, data-heavy methods. So, to continue Mintzberg's theory, is it his okay? Strategic, okay, can be used in conjunction with other forms of planning. Some okay. So it can be used, tends to focus on economic, physical, infrastructural institutional solutions that often benefit the enthusiastic lead actors and lead sectors who carry it out. Okay, then this one, so strong on designing a fit organization. So these are characteristics of strategic planning. Okay, and then also led by champions who carry out change. So strong establishing performance standards. So please and please try to remember all this one and measuring results. Performance standards. Always when you see performance standards, so this is connected, or it's when strategic standards is connected with measuring results. So what can't be managed can't be measured, or what can't be measured cannot be managed, right? So so tend to gloss over deep-seated, complex, value-based or cultural-based problems that have no overnight solutions. For example, social transformation. Strategic planning can sometimes skip over meaning. So as a meaning, skip over problems that are rooted in values, culture, or history. These deep-seated complex issues, such as social transformation or changing community attitudes, like the culturalization or the culturing, they aren't easily addressed by a single strategy or a short-term plan. So they require long-term adaptive approaches and often go beyond what a strategic plan can deliver in the short run. So that's what it meant. Okay. There's another one here. So, this is also important. Okay. Please memorize this one. Future focus, client driven, outcome and results oriented, high involvement, meaning the workforce, clients, suppliers, partners. It is also dynamic. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are 5 key strategic plan. Identify and then identify context of strategic issues, meaning that you understand both the internal and external environments that shape these issues, and then sort complete information, meaning gather and organize all relevant data and background. Then we employ analytical tools, and one of them is one of the many, SWOT analysis. Then strategic issues identified that you need to Okay, so he was the former HLURB head, so and they had this one which you're still seeing on the HLURB guidelines. So this strategic planning process. I think this is the summary. Okay, centered down. There we go. Of this one, growth wall. I will just introduce, okay. Ang dami pa ito. Okay, this one just to make sure we all understand the model of long-term regional development. This is important, so we cannot skip this. So growth pole, so there's emphasis on exchange economy, meaning that the model is built around key centers. Exchange economy, meaning key centers, often major cities or primate cities where economic activity is concentrated. So these centers are hubs for trade, services, and industry driving the regional economy. Development benefits through ripple effect, okay, from concentrated investments. So investments and resources are focused in the growth pole, with the expectation that benefits such as investments and resources, such as jobs, for example, infrastructure, and increased economic activity that will radiate outward, okay? That will radiate outward to surrounding areas. So this is known as the trickle-down effect, okay? So principally export-based linkage from the regional growth pole to the primate city. So the growth pole success is closely linked to export activities and economic connections, the linkage with larger cities, okay? So the growth pole success is closely linked to export activities and economic connections with larger cities like the national capital. It prioritizes products or services that can be sold outside the region. So that's growth pole. So the growth pole strategy can jumpstart development, but risk leaving out peripheral or less connected areas unless deliberate measures are taken to spread the benefits. So the centralized territorial integration here, okay? Emphasis on use economy instead of focusing on a single growth center. So you don't have that. This approach aims for development across multiple subregions. Okay. Economic activity is rooted in local needs and uses rather than just exchange or export. So development benefits through sub-regional self-sufficiency fostered by locally determined dispersed investment. So, hanggang dito yun. Meaning that the goal is to build capacity and economic resilience at the local level, promoting investments in different towns or municipalities so they can be self-reliant and less dependent on distant centers. So selective closure here is here, okay? Certain areas may limit outside economic influence, for example, through local content requirements or restrictions on imports to promote local industries and encourage internal growth. So may limit outside economic influence. So you can see here, the selective closures. So this model supports more balanced development and can empower local governments, but it requires strong local capacity and coordination. Functional integration here, okay. There's emphasis on exchange economy. So here, exchange economy, exchange economy. So similar to the growth ball, but with a more distributed approach. The focus is on here, okay, building and strengthening linkages between areas, meaning cities, towns, and rural communities within the region. So development benefits through intra-regional linkages fostered by dispersed investments. Okay. The region grows by connecting different areas, okay, through infrastructure, trade, transport, and services, rather than concentrating investment in a single hub. So there's the hub there, but there's also a hub here. So diverse functions or functional linkages to other regions. So the model encourages each sub-region to develop its own strengths and then link with other regions, both within and outside its boundaries. So these connections might be economic, through trade, social, through cultural connections, migration, or via migration, or infrastructural through roads, power grids, etc. So functional integration supports sustainable, resilient regional economies by promoting connections across multiple centers, rather than reliance on just one. So here, so you can just read later this one, the explanation. I would like to make some emphasis on that one by Mading through, okay. Characteristics, 3 steps, national. Wait just a moment. I think you already know about this so it said here characteristics of disjointed increment, disjoint, or I think this is disjointed incrementalism. And so yeah, this disjointed, sorry. Disjointed. Okay. As proposed by Lindblom, okay, the disjointed incrementalism approach is characterized by a continuous reaction to problems as they emerge. So this means planning does not follow a grand master plan or ideal vision. Instead, planners respond as planners appear one after another. There's no long-term blueprint here, and just ongoing adjustments to reality. So this is quite a long one. Incrementalist decision maker develops only a few strategies and none of them differs from the status quo. So do you know what it means here? That None of the yeah. So then the evaluation of these options then focuses on their differences from what is an existing state of affairs rather than as under the lessons, analyzing each against the other. But I would just like to make emphasis on the aims. Ano yung aims? Hmm. Reset na ano pa. Hang on. Ano ka lang ha? Yan. So si Evelyn Bloom. But just Lindblom is okay. Matandaan niya na yan. Disjointed incrementalism approach is a continuous reaction to problems as they emerge. The aim value, but the solution of immediate pressing problems. So that leads to modeling through, meaning succession of problems and providing solutions for them. It is addressing immediate pressing problems as they come one after another. And this is why it's often called modeling through, because the succession of problems, working to find practical solutions as situations develop. So the approach is one of continuous short run marginal adjustments to policies rather than the evaluation of more radical alternatives. So changes are usually small, incremental adjustments to existing policies, not sweeping reforms or radical new policies. So each step is a slight modification rather than a major shift. So the approach avoids the problem. Okay, avoids the problem for generating ideal goals and generating ideal goals and reflects the fragmentation of agencies in real life, but is ill-equipped to deal with complex problems and may be a recipe for inertia planning, constantly chasing after yesterday's problems. So disjointed incrementalism is realistic about how fragmented government agencies are. Coordination is often difficult and big changes are rare. So this is according to this theory. However, because it focuses on short-term fixes, this approach may not address complex, deep-rooted problems that need bigger solutions. There's also a risk of just reacting to issues as they come rather than moving forward, which can lead to inertia planning. What's inertia planning? It's always behind, never ahead. Okay, so this approach helps avoid gridlock and okay, so I hope you can hear me still. The process is marked by manageability, okay, since there's no attempt at an exhaustive gathering of information or at considering all the alternatives and their consequences. In this jointed incrementalism, I have to repeat this because it was not recorded earlier. We lost Jen, but she came back quite quickly anyway. So I just need to repeat again. In disjointed incrementalism, planners and policymakers do not try to gather all possible data or weigh every single option and consequence. Instead, the process is kept manageable and realistic. So the focus is on what can actually be done with the information and resources at hand rather than aiming for completeness. Also, it is the strategy which policymakers actually follow. Okay. Uh, so decision makers actually follow. This approach most of the time is like this. This means instead of making decisions based on grand theories or comprehensive models, they work with what's available, learning and adjusting as they go, living to in practice rather than struggling to realize some logical but unattainable idea. So the main goal in this joint is a little better each time rather than aiming for um stuck by the search for the best solution. Planners I'll make this fast now because wala yata yung ano ni Jen, yung kanyang, okay. So, I think she's here again to continue the recording. So, the incrementalist decision maker develops only few strategies and none of them differs from the status quo. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina. In disjointed incrementalism, planners usually propose only a limited set of alternatives. And these are often minor adjustments rather than major departures from current practice. So change is incremental and not radical. Then we continue the evaluation of these options here. Then focuses on their difference from one another and from the existing state of affairs rather than as under the rational approach, analyzing each alternative as a whole. So, up to here, instead of conducting a comprehensive and end-to-end analysis of every possible strategy, as in rational planning, incrementalism compares the proposed options mainly in terms of how they differ from each other and from the present situation. So here, one reason for this is that decision makers actually find impossible to deal, okay, with the mass of information laid out before them. In practice, planners and policymakers are overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data and complexity involved in fully analyzing every option. This makes exhaustive analysis unrealistic. So another reason, we will be very patient, okay? Another reason is that they do not perceive as feasible courses of action that differ radically from what they're used to. Um, or ones that lie outside the narrow range imposed by institutional constraints. So most decision makers tend to disregard options that are too far um, removed from their current practices or institutional limits. So this is because both personal habits and the rules of the organization limit what can realistically be considered. Then continue. Such context display well-defined institutions, continuity of social and organizational norms, and actually reflect the American government and corporate bureaucracies that were the objects of Lindblom's observation. So just be patient now because it's too noisy, and then it's even yeah, difficult to concentrate really. So because incremental changes are modest and familiar, it's easier to get consensus. So even if only on what to avoid rather than on some perfect vision, so people are more likely to agree on preventing negative outcomes than on pursuing bold, untested ideas. So disjointed incrementalism or muddling through is practical and realistic. It it may work within the limits of existing systems and available information. And it emphasizes small manageable steps. It also aims for consensus by avoiding radical changes. But okay, but it lacks some, it says about advantages here. And so it says an advantage of the approach is that social agreement is more likely to be attained than in the case when targets are ideal values. So Lindblom reaffirms Karl Popper's view that it's easier to obtain agreement on some this should be evil, on some evil than on some ideal goal. So muddling through, do you think is positive or negative? So the questions, some of the questions maybe might might be uh might be on how we consider this type of theory, the muddling through planning approach. Would you want to utilize this one, or is it really happening in your respective LGUs? So in some, so this is now the mm, conclusion. So characteristics, still on characteristics. So in some, the potentially important advantages of the strategy include concern for manageability and thus non-comprehensiveness. So meaning that disjointed incrementalism values solutions that are manageable in scale, instead of trying to cover every possible issue all at once. It emphasizes working with problems and solutions that can realistically be handled by planners and decision makers. Then concern to be empirically grounded. Decisions are based on what can be observed and measured in real life situations, not on broad theoretical models. So this keeps the approach rooted in actual experience, facts, and data encountered as problems arise. Then openness and fluidity, and thus readiness to perceive new problems. Because the incrementalist approach is not rigid or overly structured, it allows for adjustments as new issues come up. So planners using this approach are expected to be open to change and to shift focus as necessary. Then the last one here is sympathy with the increasing groundswell of feeling in many democracy that decision making needs to be more decentralized and more sensitive to the values of different groups. So this approach aligns with the growing movement in many democratic societies to distribute decision-making power more broadly. So instead of centralized top-down control, incrementalism encourages sensitivity to the differing priorities and perspectives of various groups within the community. So I think we can skip this one already. And just the last one here is the mixed scanning. So, okay. Mixed scanning. This is the last one now. Good morning. So, it's 12:07. Di ba, we have the matira ang matibay principle. So, if you are still here, when I finish, so I would like to congratulate you. So, mixed scanning, it was theorized by Amita Etzioni. So it's called the mixed scanning approach. It's a compromise strategy, okay, in planning and decision making instead of relying entirely on either the rational comprehensive model, which is exhaustive and time consuming, or the incremental approach, which only makes small changes. Mixed scanning tries to get the best of both worlds. These two, okay? So how it works? So it uses a broad long-term framework to guide big or fundamental decisions. This ensures that planning isn't just focused on immediate or small-scale issues, but considers the bigger picture and long-term direction. At the same time, it allows for short-term specific studies or decisions focusing in detail on issues as they come up. So this is where more detailed rationalistic analysis is applied to selected sectors or topics rather than to everything at once. So what are the levels of scanning? The approach recognizes that planning can happen at multiple levels, some more general, some more detailed. So all-encompassing level, take note, this gives a strategic overview, okay, and helps ensure no major options are missed, but does not require exhaustive analysis at every possible detail. Then, highly detailed level, for issues identified as important, planners do a deeper analysis, examining them as fully as possible. Also, lower or tactical levels, high level scanning sets the direction and priorities, which is strategic, while more focused lower level analysis is used for making or adjusting decisions along the way, and that's tactical. So this approach helps planners avoid missing major issues which can happen in incremental planning. while also avoiding analysis, that's a risk in rational comprehensive planning. It's especially useful in complex urban planning environments where it's not possible to analyze everything in depth, but where focusing only on small changes is also not enough. So it's in the middle. So mixed scanning combines the broad perspective of rational planning with the practicality of incremental adjustments. Um, so this one, 2 tiers. Um, the two tiers of the approach here, and there, okay, because there's the up and number sheet. I mean, the mixed scanning approach uses two levels, right, of decision making, incremental and comprehensive. So these two levels are connected through certain rules or triggers. For example, after making a series of small incremental decisions, the decision maker is expected to pause and conduct a more comprehensive review of the overall framework. So this prevents the process from drifting away from long-term goals. The contingency approach and mixed contingency approach, okay, which is similar to Avron Ben David's okay, reduced planning model. Okay, so make contingency approach, reduced planning approach. Dami, no? So this approach attempts to address two classic problems in planning. So the heavy information demands of the rational systematic approach. Okay, and then which is sometimes unrealistic, and the tendency for incrementalist approaches to be too conservative or limited in scope. So the contingency approach seeks to here to combine practical operational guidance with sensitivity to the specific situation. However, for it to be truly effective as a middle ground, it still needs to be more clearly defined. Um, so here, mix is coming now. So we can now conclude that mix is coming is balancing all these approaches and then small step decisions with periodic larger strategic reviews. So it helps planners avoid both information overload from being too comprehensive and the risk of being too cautious or missing the bigger picture from being too incremental. So I think if you're a planner, would you choose mixed scanning or would you be using blended types of planning approach, right? So I think we are okay. So we need to meet again tomorrow at 12 to 1. So we will also be, but before that, we will be posting already the yung missing materials, presentation materials on Google Classroom. Okay, so Jen, take it away, and we apologize for the noise and what